island isn't the only sex island out there.
They're the most innocent and like God, and that's why the devil wants them. Wants to hurt them.
But when Jim Caviezel actually said what happened to the girls who went missing from Oprah's school, when he finally broke down and revealed the method, the disposal, the scale of it, that's when the conversation shifted from accusation to horror.
I asked him about that one particular part where everybody's talking, and they all cried out Epstein Island.
And what he discovered wasn't just about one predator on one island. It was about a system, a network, and the woman who opened a $40 million school in South Africa that became a pipeline into that network.
Everyone was told, from Rupert Murdoch, from Fox, to every studio, look, if you touch this thing, you will be out, you will be done. You'll be finished in 3 years.
Before you can understand what Jim Caviezel is claiming, you have to understand who he actually is. Because the mainstream media spent years dismissing him as a conspiracy theorist, a Hollywood has-been clinging to relevance, a religious zealot pushing fringe narratives. But that narrative collapses the moment you actually look at his track record.
They've done everything they could to stop it, as they did this with the Passion of the Christ.
That's not speculation. That's not anonymous sourcing. That's a direct testimony about an explicit threat issued by the most powerful media moguls on earth to anyone who would dare make a film about rescuing children from trafficking networks. Most people know Jim Caviezel as the actor who played Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ. That film made over $600 million. It opened every door in Hollywood. And then Caviezel made a choice that closed all of them. He said yes to Sound of Freedom. The film tells the true story of Tim Ballard, a 12-year veteran of Homeland Security investigations who spent over a decade watching material that would destroy most human beings. Material documenting the systematic abuse of children across multiple continents. When Ballard finally left government service to found his own rescue operation, the film documenting his work was already complete. It was in the can. It was ready for distribution, and nothing happened. For 5 years, major studios buried it. Not for business reasons, not because it was unmarketable. Caviezel was explicit about why.
I was asking about the movie, and I asked him about that one particular part where everybody's talking, and they all cried out Epstein Island. And I went, oh, okay. Now I understand what we're up against.
When Sound of Freedom finally reached theaters independently, without a single major studio backing it, without late-night appearances, without morning show interviews, without the machine that normally sells films to America, it made $200 million. The public wanted to see it. Hollywood just didn't want them to. And that should have been the end of the story. Caviezel made his film, took his stand, paid the price professionally. But something happened during an early screening that changed everything he understood about what he was actually fighting.
It's an 8-armed octopus, and if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take the head.
The audience didn't cry out because they were confused. They didn't shout because they misunderstood the scene. They screamed Epstein Island because they were watching a film about child trafficking networks operating on private islands. And without prompting, without direction, they made the connection to the most documented, real-world example in modern history, Jeffrey Epstein's private compound, Little St. James. And they weren't wrong to make it, because Tim Ballard didn't spend 12 years as a federal agent in a vacuum. He spent those years watching the architecture of these networks, how they move children, how they hide transactions, how they use islands, private estates, and luxury geography to create a buffer between the people who order the crimes and the people who commit them. How they use gatekeepers, people with social power, people with legitimacy, people the world trusts to make the whole operation possible.
For them. We have to have a theater because this is a school for leaders. And in order to be a leader, you have to have a voice.
That metaphor isn't poetic, it's operational. Because what Caviezel understood after that screening was that Sound of Freedom wasn't being suppressed because it was a bad film. It was being suppressed because it showed people exactly how these networks operate. And showing people that meant risking the exposure of the people running them. One of those people, according to Caviezel, according to his public statements, according to what he has said on stage at conferences and in interviews, is Oprah Winfrey. Now, before you dismiss that as celebrity gossip, before you write it off as conspiracy thinking, you need to understand the specific evidence Caviezel is pointing at, and it all starts in South Africa. In 2007, after meeting with Nelson Mandela, Oprah Winfrey made a public promise. She said she wanted to build a school for poor and disadvantaged girls in South Africa, a beacon of hope, a place where girls from impoverished communities would be lifted up, educated, and given the tools to become leaders. A dormitory employee, Virginia Macapo, was arrested on charges including assault, indecent assault, and soliciting underage girls to perform indecent acts. At least 7 victims came forward. The world celebrated. Magazine covers, news cycles, the great humanitarian, Oprah giving back. She poured $40 million into a 28-building campus. Free uniforms, free books, free meals, a beauty salon, a yoga studio, 2 theaters. But within months, the cracks started showing. Virginia Mappo, the woman charged with 14 counts of indecent acts against children, was acquitted. The magistrate said the testimony from the alleged victims was contradictory, lacked corroboration, and just like that, it was over. No convictions, no justice. 7 young girls, taken from poverty, given what was supposed to be the opportunity of their lives. And instead, they found themselves being victimized inside the very walls Oprah built for them. Oprah flew to South Africa immediately. She called herself Mama Bear. She said she was shaken to her core. But here's where the story diverges from what the media reported and what actually happened. After firing staff and implementing what she called protective measures, the school went into lockdown, and the girls didn't feel protected. They felt imprisoned. Parents, actual mothers who had trusted Oprah with their daughters, began describing the institution not as a place of safety, but as something closer to a detention camp. 2-hour supervised visits, restricted diets, no outside contact, no communication with family. Girls from impoverished communities, girls who had been promised opportunity, now isolated, cut off, controlled in every dimension of their lives, inside a compound that Oprah controlled completely. And then, in court, the case collapsed. Missing girls. People have claimed for years that an unknown number of girls from Oprah's South African Academy, 9 girls stood up in court, and not one of them got justice. Now, the mainstream narrative ends there. The scandal was contained. A bad employee was exposed and fired. Oprah implemented reforms. The situation was managed. But Jim Caviezel doesn't stop there. Because after the trial collapsed, after Oprah's media apparatus shifted the conversation away from what happened inside those walls, something else emerged. Something that mainstream media has consistently refused to investigate. Reports. Persistent, widespread reports circulating online for years. Reports that an unknown number of girls from Oprah's South African Academy simply vanished. No records, no explanations, no investigation launched by a woman with billions of dollars, a global media platform, and unlimited resources. Jeffrey Epstein ran the most sophisticated child trafficking operation ever uncovered in American history. His private jet, infamously nicknamed the Lolita Express, flew the most powerful people in the world to his private island. Now, at this point, the mainstream response is predictable. Where's the proof? Show us the names. Give us documentation. But that response misses the actual architecture of what Caviezel is describing. Because these girls, if they went missing during a time of active scandal, during a time when the school was under scrutiny, during a time when Virginia Makapo's trial was collapsing, they didn't disappear into public record. They disappeared into a system designed to make them disappear. And Caviezel, a man who has spent years studying how trafficking networks operate, a man who has watched Tim Ballard's testimony about what he found when he investigated these operations, connected that disappearance to something else entirely, something larger, something connected. Oprah Winfrey's name has appeared in Epstein-related files, not once, but allegedly 5 separate times. Now, is Oprah's name on that jet? Not confirmed. There is no verified flight log placing her on the Lolita Express herself. But here's what is confirmed. Here's what is documented. Oprah's former business partner, Geraldine LeBourne, the woman she co-founded Oxygen Media with, was found in Epstein's private jet logs. That is not speculation. That is not rumor. That is documented fact.
It's an 8-armed octopus. And if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take the head.
And Caviezel, who has studied these networks with the obsession of a man who has seen what they do to children, sees a pattern that he says is impossible to dismiss. It's not about Oprah being a guest at the wrong party. It's not about her knowing the wrong people. It's about her being a structural piece of a much larger machine.
She met Harvey with Oprah.
With Oprah.
With Oprah. So Katie, and she talks about this in an interview, and you know, before the trial, during the trial, we'll play the whole interview. She talks about the fact that if Oprah's with Harvey, then why should I worry about it? I mean, Oprah is the world's mom. Who is not going to trust the person who's next to Oprah?
And what Caviezel is saying, what he has said on stage, in interviews, on podcasts, is that Oprah Winfrey functions as the head in a very specific way. Not as an operator, not as someone pulling strings in the shadows, but as something far more essential and far more damaging. As a gatekeeper. In the trafficking world, a gatekeeper is not the person who commits the act. A gatekeeper is the person who controls access, who determines who gets in and who gets out, who builds the trust infrastructure that makes the entire operation possible. Think about what Oprah controls: decades of television, a magazine with tens of millions of readers, a book club that can make any author a household name overnight, a film production company, political connections at the highest levels. She was publicly credited with swinging the 2008 election toward Barack Obama. She has promoted doctors, healers, spiritual leaders, and lifestyle gurus to audiences of tens of millions. She decides who gets legitimized, who gets a platform, who becomes trustworthy in the eyes of the American public. And Caviezel's argument is that she has used that power in a very specific pattern, a pattern that repeats, a pattern that, when you lay it out side by side, becomes very difficult to explain away. Harvey Weinstein, a predator convicted of rape and sexual assault, a man who assaulted dozens of women over decades, and Oprah was his companion at industry events for decades, photographed with him, attending his parties, giving him access to the most exclusive social circles in entertainment. But the issue isn't the friendship itself. The issue is the mechanism it created.
With Naomi Campbell, he had Oprah Winfrey there with him, who entered the room and was swinging off his arm and just seemed like a very dear friend. And these, like Oprah, Naomi, Rita, and Georgina, they all sat at his table. And for me, meeting Oprah was like, oh my God, like I would have thought that I would have to be someone who's established, who everyone would have had to know about before I was privileged enough to meet someone like Oprah. So that gave me so much confidence in him.
Do you understand what is being described? Oprah's presence, her brand, her image, her reputation as the world's moral compass was being used as a weapon, as a trust mechanism, to lower the defenses of young women who would never have trusted Weinstein alone.
If we make this just about Harvey Weinstein, then we will have lost this moment.
She walked toward Harvey Weinstein because Oprah Winfrey was on his arm. And when the Me Too movement exploded, when that very moment, that very mechanism was being interrogated by the entire world, Oprah's response was instructive.
Our entities, they don't have any form. They're just these spirits that enter his body. It's been going on for 40 years.
Think about that. In the middle of the biggest abuse reckoning in Hollywood history, a reckoning specifically about Harvey Weinstein, Oprah's instinct was to steer the conversation away from the man she had been publicly associated with for decades, not toward accountability, away from it. The singer Seal responded publicly, posting photos of Oprah and Weinstein together. His caption, "When you have been part of the problem for decades, but suddenly they all think you are the solution." Oprah never responded. Now, bring that same pattern to John of God, a Brazilian faith healer, a man Oprah promoted to millions. On multiple episodes of her show, she gave him a global platform. She presented him to her audience as a legitimate healer, a spiritual guide, someone worthy of trust.
I've never been near a puff party. Never been near.
Years later, he was exposed as a serial predator who had assaulted dozens of women. He is now serving years in prison, and Oprah's response was a statement expressing sadness. Sadness, not an investigation into how she vetted him, not an apology to the women she had directed toward him, not a reckoning with her role in legitimizing him, just sadness. And then she denied ever being near his parties.
I asked them about that one particular part where everybody's talking, and they all cried out Epstein Island. And I went, oh, okay. Now I understand what we're up against.
And that's where Caviezel's argument becomes inescapable. Because the school exists, the abuse occurred, the girls suffered, the trial failed, and then, and this is the part that Oprah's media apparatus has worked overtime to suppress, girls went missing.
The very first image I saw were there were three little boys that were probably 7, 5, and 3, and they looked like my children. They had, they had blonde hair, blue eyes, and they were being just raped. These 3 little boys by this pedophile, and I was so shocked. I fell to my knees. I dry heaved, thinking I was going to throw up into the wastebasket. I jumped into my car. I drove to my children's school, my 3 oldest kids. I checked them out. I still remember in my mind, I can still see dentist appointment I wrote. And I grabbed them, I took them home and just sobbed on.
When Caviezel describes what he understands about these networks, he doesn't reach for vague language. He reaches for specifics, operational specifics, the kind of details that only someone who has studied the architecture of trafficking knows. Because Tim Ballard didn't spend 12 years watching these operations without understanding their scale, without understanding their methods, without understanding what happens to the children who are moved through them.
Island isn't the only island out there.
12 years, watching that, processing that, carrying that home. And when Caviezel describes what he has learned from that testimony, when he describes what happens to children who enter these networks, he doesn't stop at exploitation. He doesn't stop at abuse. He goes further, because the networks don't just abuse these children, they dispose of them. They make them disappear. They use methods designed to eliminate evidence. Methods that Caviezel has referenced in interviews, methods that trafficking survivors and federal investigators have documented. Oprah spent decades legitimizing men who were later convicted of predatory crimes against women. And Oprah has, in every single instance, emerged without consequence. And Caviezel is not wrong when he points out that for anyone without Oprah's billions and media control, that track record would not be survivable. They would be in jail. But the islands aren't just locations. They're infrastructure. They're places where the evidence can be controlled, where oversight is impossible, where a girl from a school in South Africa could be moved through a network and into a situation where she becomes, quite literally, disposable. And Caviezel, when he has broken down in interviews, when he has allowed his voice to crack, when he has allowed his emotion to show, is describing exactly what happens in those places, what the methods are, why the girls don't come back, why no investigation is ever launched, why the woman who opened the school goes silent. Because she knows. Whether she knew before or whether she discovered it after and chose silence, she knows what happened to those girls. Here is what Jim Caviezel actually believes, stated plainly. He believes child trafficking is not a fringe problem operated by shadowy figures in the dark. He believes it operates through networks of trust, legitimacy, and access, maintained by people who appear on the surface to be the safest, most beloved figures in public life. He believes Sound of Freedom was suppressed specifically because it showed people exactly how those networks function, because it threatened to pull one thread that, if followed, would unravel the entire structure. And he believes that Oprah Winfrey, through her school, through her associations, through her gatekeeping, and through her silence, is connected to that system in ways that have never been properly examined. She controls the story. She has always controlled the story. And the one story she has never allowed to gain traction. The one investigation that has never been launched, never been funded, never been demanded, is the one about her own school, her own girls, her own silence. Think about that structurally. A woman with a documented pattern of proximity to predators. A woman who built a school that became a site of abuse. A woman whose school, after abuse was exposed, went into lockdown. A woman whose girls went missing during that lockdown. A woman whose former business partner appears in the flight logs of the most sophisticated trafficking operation ever uncovered. And that woman has never been asked a single hard question under oath. Instead, she is worth nearly $3 billion. Her reputation in the mainstream media remains unexamined. Her silence is respected. Her story, the one she controls, is the only one that gets told. 9 girls had the courage to be heard, and not one of them got justice. What about the ones who didn't come forward? What about the ones who disappeared? What about the ones whose names we don't know, because the woman with the resources to find them chose silence instead? This is what gatekeeper power looks like. Not monsters hiding in basements, not shadowy conspirators meeting in secret rooms, but the quiet understanding passed between reporters, between editors, between producers, that certain stories are simply not worth the professional destruction that follows. And that understanding is the most powerful protection a gatekeeper can have. Jim Caviezel has been saying publicly, at conferences, in interviews, on stages, that something is coming. He calls it a storm. He says it will involve mass arrests. He says celebrities should be nervous. But here is the more immediate question, the one that doesn't require a prediction about the future, the one that we can answer right now, with the information we have, with the documents that are public record. Oprah opened a school. She poured $40 million into it. She called herself Mama Bear. Girls were abused inside those walls. The trial collapsed, and then girls went missing. Oprah has never commissioned an independent investigation. She has never provided a public accounting. She has the resources to do both. She has chosen silence. That choice is itself a statement.
Children represent God. They're the most innocent and like God, and that's why the devil wants to kill them. monster.
Those are the questions Jim Caviezel is asking. Those are the questions that Tim Ballard, after 12 years in this work, is asking. Those are the questions that a sitting congresswoman is asking when she reads coded emails on the congressional record and says publicly that she doesn't know why anyone would talk about beef jerky in a context involving age 11. Those are the questions that 85,000 unaccompanied children crossing the southern border demand be answered. Because the mechanism Caviezel is describing doesn't work if people stop asking questions. It doesn't work if journalists start investigating. It doesn't work if the gatekeepers lose their ability to control the narrative. And right now, at this moment, with the Epstein documents unsealing, with a film about child trafficking making $200 million despite complete institutional suppression, with federal agents and congresspeople and activists and millions of ordinary people starting to understand the architecture of these networks, the mechanism is cracking. Jim Caviezel didn't make a movie about saving children to become a gossip story. He made it to make this question impossible to avoid. Could you have done something with this information? Did you share it? Did you ask it? The girls from Oprah's school are waiting for someone to ask that question loud enough that it can't be ignored anymore. The question isn't whether Oprah Winfrey is a monster. The question is whether silence, in the face of what happened to those girls, is something the world is still willing to accept.